What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. Another great conversation to bring you from our week in Indy. And this time around, it's JP Finlay from NBC4 in Washington, has covered this team for so long, the Commanders, and is so tapped in, but also is able to provide us great high-end insight in terms of what went wrong for Washington last season. If you remember, traded for Laramie Tunsil, traded for Deebo Samuel, re-signed Bobby Wagner, re-signed Zach Ertz. They went all in on 2025 and all in on what they perceived to be a true Super Bowl window after making the NFC Championship game in Jaden Daniels' first season as a rookie. Didn't end up working out. They stayed old. They got older in some spots, and lo and behold, they got injured as well. Now, it starts with the quarterback. The quarterback missed way too much time for Washington to have any sort of representative or championship caliber season. But the overall approach is one you could certainly quibble with, especially when looking at this Washington roster now and some of the things they need and understanding that they have just 2 picks in the first 100, which JP will get to. But it's a fascinating discussion. It's a history lesson of sorts. And to me, it's one the Patriots should be learning from. The Commanders should be a cautionary tale for Mike Vrabel, Elliott Wolf, Ryan Cowden, John Stryker, all the rest who will help shape this Patriots offseason to be whatever it ends up being. Now, does that mean don't sign accomplished players? Does it mean don't bring back some of your own that you feel were vital to the Super Bowl run that you were able to put together in 2025? No and no. But you do have to be discerning, and you have to project out, and you have to pay for future performance, not what's already on someone's resume. Because how you build this thing this offseason will drastically impact how you are able to move forward in one of the most critical periods of your franchise's history. And I know that sounds very dramatic, but when you think about the amount of money that you will be paying Drake Maye 1 year from now, when he's first eligible for an extension, and he probably resets the market at the position, it's going to start getting a lot harder. That's the way of the world. That is just simply how it works. You are dealing with limited funds, and the extent to which those funds are limited is up to the owner's discretion. And so certain places, Philadelphia is one of them. We got to talk to the great Dave Zangaro on a recent episode of Next Pats. We talk about that A.J. Brown situation. They're not dying to part ways with A.J. Brown. It actually puts them in a pretty strong position leverage-wise and in terms of Howie Roseman's ability to negotiate with other teams, because that's not a money issue. They don't need to get rid of A.J. Brown because he's making too much money. They don't care. Perfectly happy. It's actually a very reasonable contract. It's not cheap, but it's about $25 million over the next couple of years for a guy who looks like a number 1 receiver. Still, 4,000-yard seasons in a row. So there are certain owners that are going to be willing to do certain things that others might not. And so where we put Robert Kraft in that conversation for these next couple of years, to me, will be fascinating. You know, again, this is this contract that's upcoming with Drake Maye, which will probably come after the Patriots have paid Christian Gonzalez as the highest paid corner in all of football, another one of the most expensive positions in the sport for the guys who are truly high-end. It's going to get harder. And so right now, how you build, the path you choose to take will impact next offseason, maybe the offseason after that. And you have to have these big money deals in mind. Those are coming. You can't avoid those. And I actually asked Mike Vrabel last week in Indianapolis when he was able to sit down with the local reporters in attendance. Do the contracts coming for Christian Gonzalez and Drake Maye, will they impact how much you're willing to spend this offseason? Here's what he had to say.
I mean, I don't think I can answer that question right now. I don't. Where I would imagine that we will try to do everything that we can to add to our roster, knowing that we have responsibilities to contracts in the future. but also we've given the opportunity to add good players. I hope that we would be able to do that. That's nothing that I've been informed of. If that's what you're looking at, that's nothing that I've been informed of at this point. So draft good players, develop them, and re-sign them, and then be able to add the right people at the right time through free agency.
Well, it sounds like Mike Vrabel hasn't been told there is a cap on the amount of spending they're able to do this offseason, but let's just see how they handle it. Because, again, you can't ignore that those monster numbers are coming down the road. And so, in some way, it should. You should have those in mind. Doesn't mean don't spend, doesn't mean take a big swing. But you're probably doing yourself a disservice if you just choose to ignore the fact that you're about to pay Drake Maye and Christian Gonzalez. And I'm sure that's not what the Patriots will do. So let's get to our conversation right now with JP. Again, we love having him on Next Pats, no matter the topic of conversation. Great human being, does a great job covering the Commanders. He's going to tell us why they're a cautionary tale for New England. Very excited now to have with us on Next Pats JP Finlay. JP, what a wealth of information this guy is with everything that's happening down in our nation's capital and their football team. But the reason I wanted to have you on Next Pats is because we got to figure out how the Patriots might be able to use the 2025 Commanders as a lesson.
What not to do?
As a learning experience from afar. Yes. Sure. Yeah, maybe what not to do. I mean, very similar situations, right? Young quarterbacks, they had a great year, and then what happens after that? So tell us, why did Washington have the season it had in 2025?
It's a really interesting question, especially framed with the Pats' success versus Washington the year before. And you got to start, the biggest reason Washington took a major step back was injuries. Right? And you can't control that. Jaden Daniels started 7 games. Jaden Daniels in 24 started all 17, was phenomenal. One of the best rookie seasons ever. So, that is the biggest thing. So, the biggest lesson, I guess, is keep Drake Maye healthy, right? And that's a little bit beyond, that's the will of the universe in some capacity. But that's the paramount thing. But Washington also, and they didn't get to the Super Bowl like New England did, right? They were in the NFC title game. But I do think they hit the gas on maybe what should have still been in kind of a rebuilding mode, trying to build up your core. And instead, they traded for a pair of veteran players in Laremy Tunsil and Deebo Samuel that combined that with a late 24 season trade of Marshawn Lattimore. So they acquired 3 veterans that cost them some serious picks, a second, a third, a fourth. They lost a bunch of picks in the trades, especially for Tunsil and then Lattimore going back to the 24 season. And that has really hampered where they are now. Right now they have 7 and 71. Those are their only picks in the top 100, coming off a 5-12 season where they're pretty obviously old. And so the biggest lesson beyond the injury stuff, which you can't control, is they were like, oh my gosh, we made it to almost the finish line. We made it to the NFC title game. We're going to bring this all back. Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, a number of veteran players, trade for more vets and Deebo and Tunsil and Lattimore. And frankly, the Tunsil trade looks pretty good. The Deebo trade was pretty good. They gave up a 5th for him. Now he's going to walk in free agency. Tunsil, they're going to get done. The Lattimore trade was a disaster. He got hurt. He wasn't good when he was on the field. The picks are coming home to roost. But they tried to lean too much on veterans and keep the momentum going. And then when you couple that, if you remember, they had that ugly trade contract situation with Terry McLaurin that impacted the whole offseason. So I think they're realizing now, hey, we got to focus on young building blocks, not just dropping pieces in.
It's really enticing, I get it, on Washington's part to say, but look at this team that we had. Right. Look how good this young quarterback is. Let's capitalize, right? Tomorrow's not guaranteed.
Totally.
And so let's make the most of this situation, especially while the quarterback's cheap. I mean, this is an interesting little side note to the Patriots situation, but they've got 1 year left where they're not paying the quarterback what might be $70 million a year.
Right.
So do you go all in? Do you try to make the most of right now because you have that quote-unquote cheat code of the quarterback on the cheap rookie contract? I do want to mention, so you mentioned some really interesting sort of overarching themes there. Injuries, one. Trading away picks, 2, and maybe reinvesting in some older players in Wagner and Ertz that, maybe you should have made a hard decision there. The injuries one I'm interested about. I know you can't control that 100%, but with Jaden Daniels in particular, was that more play style related or was it protection related? And I wonder if the Patriots can learn from either one, because Drake Maye is a guy who's held on to the football, taken a lot of hits.
Sure.
The offensive line, argument could certainly be made that they need to shuffle some pieces up there. So I'm curious, what was maybe the primary factor there for Washington?
Well, I'm not sure my opinion matters. Look at what they did this offseason to dramatically change their offensive coaching staff. Like Cliff Kingsbury leaving, whether it was, mutually agreed upon or no, we're going to make a switch, it's hard not to look at kind of some of the stuff that happened with Jaden. Always, they try to run at tempo a lot. So that's more snaps, more plays. They ran plenty of RPOs and design quarterback runs. And maybe there's a realization that Jaden's going to play his way, which can border on reckless. He's not the biggest guy. He doesn't slide very well. So maybe we as a coaching staff have to do more to protect him, to get him under center more, to try to run more play action, get more open guys for him that he doesn't have to be Superman all the time. So, the Jaden stuff, the injuries were all super fluky, right? Like the hit that actually knocked him out for the remainder of the year in Minnesota was on an interception when he's trying to chase down the linebacker that made the play. Like, that's not him running too much.
And that's not a scheme issue either.
Right. But the RPO that got him hurt in the first place against Seattle when he was in the game down 30, why are you running an RPO? So you wonder if some of their changes, particularly Kingsbury out, David Blau in, Blau's going to run a much more traditional kind of Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, quarterbacks getting under center offense. I think they thought they needed a change for a number of reasons, because I think they want to run the ball better too, but all of those things will help Jade.
Yeah,
ideally.
Run game would help the Patriots quarterback too, and the ability to, every time we ask you to pass, it doesn't have to be a straight drop back. We can maybe mix in more play action,
Sure.
and I know Josh McDaniels tried to do that this year with Drake Maye, but there were times this season where the run game was struggling. So now when it comes to the trades, I'm curious, as somebody who's following the Patriots this offseason in particular, if you from afar hear about the Patriots and they're kicking the tires on, I'm not saying this is happening, but we can't stop hearing about Maxx Crosby here in Indianapolis, and the Patriots, boy, wouldn't they, love to maybe be able to acquire him. Having had the experience you had in Washington last year, do you look at that trade and say, don't do that, because that's a guy who's about to be 30 years old and he's making a lot of money, and that feels like the kind of all-in move that Washington tried to make, and maybe they lost sight of that building process that they should have had in mind.
It's interesting because the situations are fairly similar, right? And I do think you could compare the skill level of Tunsil to the skill level of Crosby. That said, I think you're going to have to give up more for Crosby.
Yeah, cost to be different, right?
Cost will be different. Some of that was contractually driven with Laramie. But you and I were just chatting about it. I mean, Crosby playing for Vrabel feels so right. It is, though, a dude that's going to turn 30 with a huge cap number. And as I don't want to get more people in New England mad at me, I think you got to have an honest look at that playoff run and it's go on the run to take advantage of it. But a lot of things kind of broke their way, and maybe you got to at least pause for a second. Like, are we on the doorstep, or do we need to add a lot more? Because if you trade for Crosby, you're talking 2 1s or a 1 and a player or something significant.
Right, 1 and a 2 maybe. I've heard maybe that Quinnen Williams trade comp, which is what the Jets ended up getting from Dallas there. Yeah, maybe you could space it out a little bit, and that eases the pain a little. But it is the kind of move that feels like a team that's a player or 2 away should be making, and maybe not the Patriots. And Elliott Wolf, who we spoke to earlier today, to his credit, was talking about, hey, just because we made the Super Bowl, we haven't lost sight of where our roster is and all the work that it needs.
And that's what I'd say Washington, for a moment, maybe lost sight of it. Thought they were further along than they were.
And I just wonder, too, how hard would it have been for them to part with a Wagner or an Ertz last offseason, understanding, those guys were contributors to a really good team, NFC Championship team, but also leaders. And those guys are, from afar, you see them and it's like, that's everything you want. And like a captain in your locker room. The Patriots don't necessarily have the same kind of one-for-one comp. I think guys like Garrett Bradbury, who is a veteran leader in the offensive line room, you could bring him back. You don't have to. The money's not crazy. Morgan Moses again on that offensive line, 35 years old.
I remember covering
Washington
him as a
guy.
It's crazy.
What a great human being, and was really good for the young players in that position group, especially. But are those the kinds of hard decisions that they should be looking at and saying, as much as this guy contributed to a Super Bowl run for us, how about Stephon Diggs? How do we not mention Stephon Diggs? He's going to be 33 years old.
Yeah.
Do you look at him and say, we should make the hard goodbye here as opposed to reinvesting.
What's interesting for me is I think Washington and Adam Peters specifically could learn from the class you guys brought in last year, free agency, Vrabel's first year, and there was a good mix. Like, you paid real big money for Milton Williams, who I think really came on strong. Like, it was a good mix of young and old, a lot of money, a one-year deal, and Washington is kind of, through 2 years of the APDQ era, sat on their hands in free agency, and I think you're going to see a different approach. And honestly, what's the kid's name? Chason?
Yeah, Caleb on Chason.
I feel like that could be somebody Washington's going after. Younger guy, has shown promise, but maybe not a ton of opportunity. Like, it's going to be interesting.
Really interesting. I love this. It's a cautionary tale sort of conversation, but JP, you are the best in terms of being able shine a light on everything that happened in Washington.
Dude, seriously,
maybe the
I have a
Patriots could
buddy
use it.
is it Falmouth on Cape Cod?
Oh, yeah.
Like, to all the people affected by the storm, like, my buddy's out of power. It's crazy. Thinking of you guys. That's serious business.
Those people on the Cape really got hit hard, but you know what? Those people on the Cape, they're tough.
Yeah, they pride themselves.
Your buddy's a tough guy.
He was like,
I'm
we're
sure.
not leaving. I was like, oh, okay.
No, he's totally fine. He's doing snow angels right now as we speak. JP, thanks a lot for being with us.
Dude.
All right, great stuff there from JP. Want to talk a little bit about the Combine now because we have some takeaways there. The workouts are all in the books. People have headed home to start their preparations for the new league year. Tampering period starts a week from when we are recording this on March 2nd. So even though we have plenty of free agency stuff to get to, let's just talk a little bit about the Combine and some of our takeaways, and let's focus on the positions that we think the Patriots might be focusing on early in the draft. So we're talking offensive tackles, we're talking receivers, we're talking tight ends. Remember, Mike Vrabel said he likes the depth at tight end in this year's class. And we're talking, of course, edge defenders. That might be the biggest need for the New England Patriots if you ask people in that building. And so let's start there. And let's start with a couple of winners and then maybe a player who now we're leaving the Combine with a few more questions than we are answers. But let's start with the great performances from a couple of players who look like day two types of picks. So if you want to reserve that first round pick for a trade of some kind, if you want to go get a receiver there or a tackle to help Drake Maye, and you're looking at day two to add on the edge, here are a couple names that we need to keep an eye on. Number one, Malachi Lawrence from UCF. Just an unbelievable height, weight, speed type of athlete based on what he did during his workout in Indy. 6'4", 253 pounds, 33, almost 34 inches, basically 33 and a half when it comes to his arm length. And really just incredible athletic testing when you're talking about the vertical leap, 40 inches there, 10-10 in the broad jump, and a 4.52 40, which at his position group, the only players who are ahead of him, Ohio State's Arvell Reese, who might be the number 2 overall pick in the draft, and Texas Tech's David Bailey, who also, I guess, could be the number 2 overall pick in the draft. He might go in the top 5 as well. So Malachi Lawrence, just a phenomenal athlete and somebody who, with that sort of size, that kind of length, and that ability to move, the Patriots are looking for somebody who could blossom into a real game-changing type of player on day 2. Look at Malachi Lawrence. Similar sort of situation here for Penn State's Danny Dennis Sutton, quickly becoming a favorite of the Next Pats podcast. If you listen to our pod from Indy with Dane Brugler of The Athletic, he mentions Danny Dennis Sutton as a potential Mike Vrabel guy on the edge. And boy, oh boy, his workout's not going to do anything to dissuade Dane or anybody else from that kind of opinion. He notched a sub-7-second 3-cone drill in an age where nobody does the 3-cone drill anymore. It's bothersome to me. I love the 3-cone drill across positions. Give me all the offensive linemen. Give me all the edge rushers. Show me that bend. Show me that quickness. Show me that start-stop ability. If you're a receiver, I want everybody to do it. Nobody does it. Danny Dennis Sutton did it. 6'9". And can I remind you, this is at 6'6", 256 pounds, 33.5-inch arms, over 10-inch hands, a 4.63 40, a 1.63 10-yard split. That's incredibly explosive off the line. And then that change of direction time. Somebody who I think character-wise is going to be a fit for the New England Patriots, and someone who you just have to watch him. Watch 2-3 games. He's going after the football. Out in the open field, he's chasing plays down from the backside. There is a visual brand. You've heard us mention those two words together over the course of this podcast. That's how one Patriots staffer put it to me in terms of the things they're looking for. When they're looking to add the right kinds of people, how do they do it? Well, when you're watching the tape, whether it's a free agent or it's a draft pick, they've got to have a visual print. They've got to be able to show on the film. It's got to jump off the screen that they're going to be one of the highest effort players on the field, that they're going to have their teammates' backs, that they're going to put the team first, that they're going to try to live up to these pillars that Mike Vrabel has laid out for the organization. Ball disruption, ball security. So defensive player, you're going after that football. That's Dennis Sutton. And the way that he performed at the Combine is certainly worthy of mention here, understanding that this is going to be a need for the New England Patriots. So, does he look a little rigid on tape at times? Sure. Does he play a little high on tape at times? Sure. But between the testing and the effort, day 2, right? This is going to be a Myles Garrett type that you're not getting that on day 2. But somebody who could come in and contribute right away for your defense if you're Mike Vrabel, heck yeah. That to me is what Dennis Sutton looks like. Okay, guys who didn't necessarily help their stock in Indy at this position. How about Cassius Howell? When you're talking about Cassius Howell and his arm length, I know this is maybe going to be an exhausting conversation for people, especially in this region, when we're talking about arm length, whether it's at tackle. We're going to talk a little arm length at tackle in just a minute here. Or on the edge, Cassius Howell checked in with 30 1/4 inch arms. Some of the shortest arms to be drafted at that position in the last 20 years. It's not ideal. He also didn't test like an incredible athlete, which there are spurts where on film he looks incredibly twitchy. Cassius Howell. We talked about him on the podcast before. Texas A&M, all kinds of productivity over the course of his career. So he's just 6'2", 253 pounds. So he got over 250. You like to see that. 30 1/4 inch arms. It's going to be really interesting to see where he ends up landing. Now, you could spin this positively. And if you want this guy on your team, based on what you've seen on tape, and again, it's great, he probably has a better chance of falling to number 31 overall now. This is a guy who is projected to be maybe a middle of the first round pick ahead of the Combine. And maybe he still will be. Maybe teams don't necessarily care all that much. But again, it's just really interesting testing too on top of the arms, right? 32.5 inch vertical, which is 41st percentile. Broad jump was 45th percentile, excuse me. The 40 was good, 4.60. That's 88th percentile. And the 10-yard split, 159. So, there's some twitch there, but I think he just would have loved to see an overall more complete athletic testing profile to go with. Just a little more length. I don't think anybody was looking at him and saying, wow, this guy is going to be long-arming people to death at the next level. But, is he an outlier? And are you willing to live with that if you're an NFL team? That'd be an interesting question. And then let's just mention really quickly here. R. Mason Thomas from Oklahoma. Not quite there in terms of the 40 or the 10-yard split where Howell was. 4.67 in the 40, 1.63 10-yard split. That's 55th percentile. And he checked in much lighter. So he was 6'2", 241. And you just watch his tape, and boy, he explodes out of his stance. And he looks like he's got all sorts of twitch and athleticism in that body, and it just didn't show up that way in Indianapolis. So interesting player there. Sort of, I felt like a borderline first-round pick, maybe before getting to Indy, and now having tested the way he did and not necessarily answering questions that maybe people had on him with an exclamation point. He's maybe more of a secure day 2 guy. Now let's stay on the edge, but let's talk about the offensive edge, and let's talk about offensive tackles. Some clear winners here, and Monroe Freeling would be, to me, one of those because of the way he checked in and just the athleticism, the 10-yard split there, 171. Better than Will Campbell, who tested as a tremendous athlete at the Combine last offseason. Armand Membu, same way. This guy's got a better 10-yard split than both. He ended up with a 4.93 40 at 6'7", 315. Really, really impressive. 33.5-inch vertical, 9'7" broad. I mean, athleticism is not going to be this guy's problem. Got good length, good lower body explosiveness. This is just going to be all about his experience level. He's a younger player, but boy, almost 11-inch hands, almost 35-inch arms. Really nothing not to like about his physical profile coming out of Indianapolis. So, you saw some mock drafts where he was a bottom of the first round guy. I think mid-season, this past season, when you're talking about the college football season, I don't see him getting too far past the middle of the first round, even with some of the inexperience, because there's just not many players who profile this way physically and being able to play left tackle for you. And especially in this draft, we'll talk in a second here about Spencer Fano, somebody who, in some ways, it's interesting. In some ways, helped himself. In some ways, not. He still very well may end up going before Monroe Freeling, but I think Freeling, he looks like a very solid first rounder and maybe a middle of the first kind of guy, maybe even higher than that, depending on how much you like him and what he's able to do during the pre-draft process. How about players that are maybe more in the Patriots' range? We're going to talk about players that we've talked about here in the past on this podcast at this position. Both right tackles. Blake Miller from Clemson, 6'6", almost 6'7", 317 pounds. Really strong in the vertical, 32 inches. Really strong broad, 9'5". You had a 5'04". Almost just made him the number one overall pick in the draft. A 5'04", 40-yard dash with a 175, very solid 10-yard split. Blake Miller played 54 games at Clemson. Again, this is a Vrabel guy that Dane Brugler has identified for us. Missed one practice because of a broken wrist in college, and that's it. In terms of play strength, can he get a little bit better? Like, why is he considered maybe more of a late first-round guy? Because he's going to have to get a little bit stronger. Might have to get a little bit more polished. But, boy, he's played a ton of football from the time he was a true freshman at Clemson. And so the experience is there. The football character is there. And then after the testing, if you're looking at the relative athletic score, we're going to talk about this a lot. This is from Kentley Platt at MathBomb on Twitter. We've been talking about him for years and years and years on this podcast, and that relative athletic score. So it goes from 0 to 10. 10's the best you can do. He ranks guys by position, from all the way back to numbers that he has from 1987. So he's comparing them against other players at these spots over the course of a long period of time. And size adjusted, basically, some of these numbers. So if you're a tackle and you run a 4.7, much more impressive than if you're a running back and you run a 4.7. So his relative athletic score for Blake Miller is 9.94. That ranked 10th out of 1,520 offensive tackles from 1987 to 2026. So that's pretty special stuff from a guy who, again, I wouldn't even say at his position, if you're talking both left and right tackle, wasn't the most impressive athlete there, but really, really impressive. So if the Patriots want to go with their, Morgan Moses fill-in of the future, whenever that happens, Blake Miller certainly should be in that conversation, especially after putting together the week that he put together in Indianapolis. Let's talk about Maxx Crosby, another player we talked a ton about over the course of the last few weeks. Latecomer to football, soccer, basketball, born in Nigeria, starts at junior college, ends up working his way to Arizona State, had a tremendous Senior Bowl, and then goes to the combine and does really, really well. Smallish hands, 9-inch hands, but 6'6", 321, really good frame, 30.5-inch vertical, another really impressive broad, 9'7" in the broad, and then a sub-5 second 40 at 4.91 with a 174 10-yard split. So that gives him an RAS, relative athletic score, of 9.91. So just a tick below where Blake Miller was. So two players that certainly helped themselves. If you're a Patriots fan and you were hoping that one of these guys would fall to the Patriots at 31, maybe there's less of a likelihood that happens now that these guys performed as well as they did, quite frankly. So let's keep an eye on that. Spencer Fano, I did mention, is his stock helped or hurt based on what happened in Indianapolis? Well, if you're a scout, probably helped, quite frankly, because he did so well in the position drills, and he moved so well, and he really showed what you could already see on tape, which is that he's a pretty polished guy, and he's a special mover at that position. But you also got confirmation of something you saw on tape, and something which, certain places, people like Dane Brugler have been reporting, since we've had initial numbers on these guys going back months and months and months now. His arms checked in at 32 and an eighth, right? So that's significant. It's below even where Will Campbell was last year. So if you're a team and you're looking at it and you're worried about how Campbell performed in the postseason, and you're not considering the knee injury that he was dealing with, and you're more looking at the arm length, and you say, wow, what a hard time this guy had in the postseason, sort of ignoring the first 3 months of the season where he was very solid. You might look at Spencer Fano and say, we can't spend a top half of the first round pick on this guy because those are short arms. Now, his wingspan's actually a little bit better than Will Campbell's, and I still do think he's going to be in the top half of the first round. Spencer Fano out of Utah. And Caleb Lomu might be a top 20 pick himself. He's the left tackle. Fano played right tackle at Utah. But just interesting to note, and something that some teams might have issue with if his arms are that short. Again, how comfortable are you willing to bet on an outlier? Fano, like Campbell, moves really well. And so there might be teams that look at Campbell's first 3 months and say, hey, we could deal with it because the Patriots made it work in New England with Campbell. So, would love to know if talking cautionary tales today, if teams look at Campbell as a cautionary tale or if they look at him as an example as to why the short arm thing actually can work at the tackle position. All right, let's get into two more offensive positions here, skill positions. Let's try to get through them really quickly. Kenyon Sadiq just maybe had the best combine period in Indy. We're talking tight ends here. He, of course, is the tight end out of Oregon. We've talked about him a number of different times, whether it's, when we're doing our Who's Next segment or, talking to Connor Rogers from NBC and from the NFL Stock Exchange pod. We're going to talk to his buddy Trevor Sikkema very, very soon here about receivers in an upcoming episode. But he basically predicted for us ahead of the combine that Kenyon Sadiq might be the most impressive performer across positions, and I think he kind of knocked it out of the park. This is really interesting. This is from NFL Researcher. Kenyon Sadiq, based on his numbers at the combine, faster than Odell Beckham. He ran a 4.39 40. Beckham ran a 4.43 40 years ago. More explosive than Andre Johnson. His broad jump, 1 inch better than Andre Johnson's Hall of Fame caliber receiver of the Texans. You remember him. He was 11-1 in the broad. Andre Johnson was 11 feet. Jumps higher than Julio Jones. 43.5-inch vertical. Julio Jones was 38.5. And quicker than Deshaun Jackson. His 10-yard split was 1/100th of a second better than Deshaun Jackson's at 1.54. Just ridiculous stuff. At 6'3", 241 pounds. So he's not the biggest guy in the world. And you're going to have to figure out, you're going to have to be creative with how you use him. He's not going to be a traditional wine. You're going to line him on the line of scrimmage. You're going to pair him with tackles. You're going to run duo behind him. I don't think that's how he's going to be used. But boy, oh boy, at a position where athleticism, generally speaking, matters more and these testing numbers translate better than they do at a lot of others, Kenyon Sadiq might have gone from a bottom of the first round player to somebody that teams will be considering a little bit earlier, even considering the positional value or lack thereof at that position these days. It's a little bit like safety, a little bit like running back, where teams aren't tripping over themselves to draft guys at this spot in the first round, generally speaking. But I believe in my last mock, I had him going at pick number 30 overall to the Broncos. I'm not sure he gets that far. Again, we'll see. Possession value being what it is, maybe he is within striking range. The Patriots love him so much and love the idea of pairing him with Hunter Henry so much and putting him with Josh McDaniels and allowing him to be used creatively the way McDaniels has used players at that position in the past. Boy, if he's within range, would you be willing to trade up for somebody like that who has such a rare athletic profile? I don't know. Be a fun question to ask Mike Vrabel after injecting him with some truth serum. Another name I wanted to mention at this position, and he's not one of the top two guys necessarily at this spot, but he's somebody that I think could really interest the Patriots because of his ability and his willingness to block, and it's Sam Roush out of Stanford. Okay? 6'6", 267 pounds. 25 reps on the bench. 38.5-inch vertical, 10.6 broad, so there's some explosiveness there. There's some real athleticism. 4.7 40. That's 4.7 flat. And a 7.08 three-cone for somebody who's damn near 270 pounds. I think you have to love, number one, just his willingness to do as many tests as he did. He did the shuttle. He did the three-cone. Again, these people don't do these things anymore. And it's frustrating for somebody who loves the combine and loves the draft the way I do and getting these numbers on all these guys. And maybe we'll get a bunch of them to do some of those things that they didn't do in Indy at their pro days. But complete workout, competitive dude, good size, good play demeanor for, I think, what the Patriots need at that position, which is, somebody who's going to move some bodies. And so with that size, and still has the ability to catch the football, Sam Roush helped himself at the combine. Oscar Delp. This is an interesting one, too, because this is somebody I could see the Patriots using as well. 6'5", 245 pounds, so not as big as Roush. And if you want to use him for his blocking ability, he's a willing blocker. I think he can help them there. And to me, football character-wise, gets great reviews, and obviously he's coming from a great program at Georgia. They found a hairline fracture in his foot, so he wasn't able to really partake in any of the testing or any of the on-field drills, and maybe we'll be able to see him do some of those things at his pro day with Georgia. But, I look at a player like that, and, if you're talking about getting a tight end on day 2 or day 3, we're going to start doing some 7-round mocks here at NextPats, and, don't be surprised to see that name somewhere on day 3. And so maybe, again, in a weird way, you don't want to see everybody crush it in Indy because you want some of these guys to fall to you if you're one of these NFL teams. And maybe Oscar Delp falls into that category for the Patriots because I could certainly see him being a fit at tight end, and he wasn't able to participate. So not somebody who was really able to help themselves in Indy the way others were. Okay, last position group, really quickly. Receiver, Jeremy Bernard. And this is a guy we've talked about in the past because he is just a well-rounded individual. And, we're talking about the Alabama receiver. The testing here, and if a guy's going to do the three-cone, he's probably going to do damn well because otherwise he would just check out and bag out of it the way so many guys do. 6.71 in the three-cone. I think you have to love that if you're an evaluator and you're evaluating this particular player and you understand that his strength is really in his all-around game. He's not the biggest guy in the world. 6'1", 206. Broad jump, 10.05. Didn't really translate the vertical. The vertical was sub 33, which isn't great. But a 4.48 40-yard dash, just really solid stuff across the board from Jeremy Bernard. And for somebody whose game is so solid, to me, this feels like a second-round pick all day long. And, does he get all the way into the 60s where the Patriots have a shot at him? I don't know. But if the Patriots are looking for somebody who's going to be able to run routes, who's willing to work the middle of the field, if they end up parting ways with Stephon Diggs and they're looking for that kind of player to be sort of next in line for them, I really like what Jeremy Bernard was able to do. If we're talking combine winners and losers, that three-cone time is near the top of the list for me, quite frankly. Staying at that position, and let's stay local, shall we? Let's go to UConn, and let's talk Skylar Bell. Because Skylar Bell is somebody that's a name that I have heard associated with the Patriots just because evaluators from across the league, they look at what they think New England would like. They look at Josh McDaniels, and they look at Skylar Bell, and they see a fit. And boy, oh boy, he knocked it out of the park. 6 feet, 192 pounds, 10-inch hands, helpful at that position. 4.4 flat in the 40-yard dash with a 1.51 10-yard split. Very strong. 41-inch vertical and an 11.1 broad. Just, to me, if you're looking for that Z kind of receiver, somebody can do a little bit of everything, right? Can work the short area, can get deep for you. 4.40 speed. At that size, 6 feet, 192. Boy, he should be able to get down the field for you and at least pose a threat there. but we've also seen him work underneath and be a really important, chain moving type of receiver for the Huskies. And so 9.71 RAS all said and done. And it's not like he was at the top of the list, but he was near the top of the list. Bryce Lance, Trey Lance's brother, believe it or not, for North Dakota State. Almost a perfect 10, RAS, 998. That's another name that we'll talk more about as the process goes on, but really like Skylar Bell and really like what he was able to do at the Combine. When that's our focus here and we're just reacting to what we saw in Indy, if you're not necessarily going to ding guys for not performing and checking out when it comes to certain elements of the week, on the field stuff, athletic testing stuff, I think you do have to give credit to the guys who do participate. And they do a lot, and they don't only do it, but they do it well. And when that stuff backs up some of the things that you see them do on the field, that to me is the most important part. And so for Skylar Bell at UConn to do what he was able to do there, and then to show up in Indy and look like one of the best athletes at the most athletic position on the field, that's good stuff for him. A guy who may have hurt himself a little bit, and this is a guy that I had in the first round of my last mock draft, and I know others did as well. Malachi Fields from Notre Dame, 4.6, 140. You don't want to see anything with a 6 after the decimal point there, generally speaking. Now, he's a behemoth of a human being. He's 6'4", 218 pounds. And he did, let's point this out, he did run the gauntlet drill at over 19 miles an hour, which had him looking like, if you're just talking sheer play speed, that's one of the fastest times at the Combine. So good for him on that front. And maybe teams will look at that and say, forget the 40, we don't care. He's 6'4", 218, and he clocked 19 miles an hour when he had to catch 7 footballs. It was like they just asked him to run straight down the field. So I give him a lot of credit for that. I just wonder if teams are going to associate his name and his performance a little too strongly with that of Keon Coleman, who obviously has been a big disappointment in Buffalo. And who knows, given the amount of pub that guy's gotten as Buffalo's been in some turmoil here lately, it feels like his lack of performance is one of the reasons Sean McDermott's not even there anymore. Although they kept the offensive coordinator as the head coach. I don't know what to make of that situation. Let's just say you're not looking to be the next Keon Coleman. And I'm not saying Malachi Fields will be. I'm just saying 4.61 when you're a receiver that's not going to vault you up draft boards. Let's just put it that way. And I will be interested to see, as we get closer to the process, as I'm talking to more people, as we see people who are really plugged in, like, Daniel Jeremiah, who I think does a great job with his mock drafts that he puts out over the course of the offseason. And he said before, his top 50, that's his eyes, that's his assessment. His mock drafts, those are based on things he's hearing from people around the league. And so we'll be really interested to see if somebody like Fields is in his next first-round mock. All right, that's it. Was able to really knock out, I think, a bunch of takeaways from the Combine. Had a blast there in Indy, as we always do. Get to talk to people like JP Finlay, get to talk to people in the league, scouts, executives, coaches, agents, the players themselves, of course. And so had a great time in Indianapolis. Glad we were able to share some takeaways with you here today. Glad we were able to talk to JP Finlay, talk some Washington, get a big picture look at how the approach should look from the New England Patriots as they get into the offseason and the new league year, which is just a few days away. Can't believe it. Free agency is about to start. What a whirlwind year this has been. You forget, the team you covered doesn't make the Super Bowl for all of 7 years? And you forget how quickly the offseason moves. But we're in it now, friends. We're in it now. We're in it together. We'll be right back here on Next Pats, talking with you very, very soon to talk a little bit about a blueprint for the offseason. 2 massive brains going to share their plans for the Patriots with us. You don't want to miss that. We'll talk to you next time.